for the global citizen.
You don't know how to fix the holes in our ozone layer. You don't know how to bring the salmon back up a dead stream. You don't know how to bring back an animal now extinct. And you can't bring back the forest that once grew where there is now a desert.
You have ignored us in the past and you will ignore us again. We have run out of excuses and we are running out of time.
Show us your faithfulness. Show us your trustworthiness. Show us your honesty. Prove us wrong. We desperately need you to prove us wrong. God help us all if you fail to prove us wrong. God help us.
Very warm welcome. You're watching Gravitas with me, Molly Gambhir. Our cover story tonight is about the Israel-Hamas war. Did the Israel Defense Forces get defeated by sexism? What does sexism have to do with this war, you must be wondering? Well, reportedly a lot. Now, we all know about the Hamas attack on Israel that took place on the 7th of October, but do you know what was happening in the weeks leading up to that attack? Female surveillance soldiers alerted the senior commanders of activity along the Gaza border, but reportedly they were not taken seriously. Why did that happen? What do we know about this kind of warning that was issued, the kind of warnings that were issued? Did the Israel Defense Forces pay the price for choosing sexism over action? We unearth this and more over the next few minutes. Also, here's a sneak peek into what else we have in store for you tonight. You would think that the armed forces are looked after quite well by any country in any part of the world. But as it turns out, Britain is a horrible exception. We tell you how the armed forces personnel there have been living in rat-infested accommodation. You heard that right. We also get you the latest on the race against time to save the 41 trapped workers in India's Uttarakhand. What is the lipstick effect? How does it work? Where all does it make its presence felt? Which countries are impacted? We tell you all that you need to know. Were the Israeli Defense Forces blinded by sexism? For weeks before the attack on the 7th of October, female surveillance soldiers in the Border Defense Corps alerted the senior commanders of activity along the Gaza border. For 2 months leading to that attack, female soldiers saw Hamas drones flying near the border. They claimed that Hamas sent drones every day, in fact, multiple times a day. The drones would hover some 300 meters from the fence and sometimes even less than that. For weeks, young female surveillance soldiers watching the border, saw Hamas training in plain sight. Their unit, known as the Eyes of the Army, is made up entirely of young girls and young female commanders, and their job essentially is to provide real-time intelligence information to the soldiers in the field. But the critical information that these women were sending to their commanders was not taken seriously. Why is that? These female soldiers were told they were overreacting. A month and a half before the war, a female soldier, in fact, noticed that Hamas was training to take over what seemed like an Israeli observation post. In one of the training camps, Hamas built a scaled model of an observer's position operated by Israel, and they trained to take down the mock observation post using drones. Another soldier saw Hamas rehearsing attacks on an exact replica of a Merkava Mark IV tank. She also observed them digging holes and placing explosives along the border. These female soldiers sent a warning up to the chain of command, including intelligence officials. The same Israeli intelligence, which is considered one of the best in the world, but it failed to see Hamas coming. Do you know why? Because it seems it was blinded by sexism. When the surveillance soldiers had raised alarm, they were ignored. Senior commanders insisted that Hamas had no plans to go to war. They ordered the female soldiers to stop being so alarmist. Hamas caught Israel off guard on the 7th of October. The rest of it is history. History that is playing out before our eyes. History that could have been avoided had Israeli military not been so sexist. Did Israel's sexism risk peace in West Asia? And the answer is yes. Let me tell you what reportedly happened in the early hours of the 7th of October. One of the surveillance soldiers noticed some strange activity in Gaza. She went on to report this to her commander, but she had to apologize for waking him up so early. When the attack on Israel started, Hamas used drones to hit Israeli positions, and they did this in the same way as the surveillance soldiers had observed in their training. That's what the female surveillance soldiers say. Now, these women had spent some 2 to 3 months learning every detail of the area assigned to them. Each of them was aware of every small change happening in the 15 to 30 kilometers of land that they monitored. But of what use is this if their input was going to be dismissed eventually? What did the female soldiers get for serving their country? Their surveillance bases were stormed by Hamas. Some survived the massacre, others died in the line of duty. As many as 15 female soldiers were killed at the Nahal Oz base on the 7th of October. 6 were abducted and held hostage in Gaza. Only one of them has been rescued. Late last month, Private Ori Megiddish was brought home by the IDF troops after an operation in Gaza. Those who survived the massacre had to hide among corpses. They lost their friends and colleagues. Many are dealing with severe trauma. And what did the IDF do for these soldiers? Let me tell you, it's only adding to their pain. It's forcing them to return to their posts. Those who don't will be sanctioned for desertion. But what really is the point? The intelligence that these women provided was never taken seriously. Is the IDF going to change that? Get rid of its sexism? Perhaps learn from its mistake. Well, it looks highly unlikely. The commanders did not visit these female soldiers after the attack. Their existence was simply ignored. And this, by the way, is not a first. This is not the first time the IDF has mistreated its women soldiers. 1 in 6 Israeli women soldiers say they have been sexually harassed during their military service. Many have fallen prey to inappropriate touching. Others have faced workplace discrimination after refusing the sexual advances of male colleagues. In fact, female cadets are even denied simple pleasures of singing or listening to music. This incident is from September at the Israeli military's non-combat training base, 80. Some women were enjoying music while doing kitchen duties, but they were asked to turn it off as there were religious soldiers present. Since the establishment of the Women Corps in 1948, women have been an integral part of the Israeli military. The IDF, in fact, is among the only armies in the world that conscript women into its ranks under a mandatory military draft law. As of 2021, women make up about 40% of the IDF's conscript soldiers and about 25% of the officer corps. In 2018, about 10,000 women served in the IDF in permanent service. But you see, it's not just about recruiting women in the military. It's also about entrusting them, valuing them, and treating them equally. What is the use if the female soldiers are only going to be suppressed by the men in power? And let me now show you a video. Yemen's Houthi rebels have released footage of the hijacked India-bound ship. Take a look first. Just a quick recap here. The Houthis have hijacked a cargo ship in the Red Sea. The ship was traveling from Turkey to India. It has now been taken to Yemen. There are 25 crew members on board the vessel. Many of them are from Ukraine. Some are also citizens of Bulgaria, the Philippines, Mexico, Romania. There are no Israelis on board. The ship was neither flying under the flag of Israel, nor is the vessel registered in Israel. So, why did the Houthis hijack it? Because the ship has a long connection with Israel. But you see, this connection is not obvious and visible to the naked eye of a group of fighters looking to hijack a ship in the Red Sea. So how did the Houthis know which ship to target? Did some country provide the fighters with intelligence? Tell them which ship they should be attacking? I will tell you why I asked this question. You see, the Red Sea shipping route is one of the busiest in the world. There are thousands of ships transiting through this stretch of water daily. In fact, this map will give you an idea of the kind of maritime traffic I'm talking about. So, of these ships, how did the Houthis manage to find a ship with an Israeli connection? The ship is called Galaxy Leader. It was sailing under the flag of Bahamas. A quick online search says that the ship is owned by a British company. It is called Galaxy Maritime Limited, and it is registered at the Isle of Man. The ship was chartered by a Japanese transport company called Nippon Yusen. It's only upon digging further that one finds that Galaxy Leader's owners are associated with Ray Car Carriers, a company that was founded by Abraham Ungar. He is one of Israel's richest men. He is popularly called Rami. Now, how did the Houthis know any of this? How did they find the Israeli ship? How was it spotted among the hundreds and thousands of others? Unless there was someone supplying the group with intelligence. Was it Iran? You see, the country is accused of backing the Houthis. Tehran has denied helping the Houthis in this hijacking operation. But you saw the video. Is it possible the Yemeni rebel group planned and executed this operation alone? The fighters used a helicopter, wore commando-style bulletproof vests, had assault rifles. How could the Houthis possibly have carried out this operation in such a professional manner without any external help? Private intelligence firms are calling the hijacking an Iranian-style vessel capture. Some are pointing at how the attack is reminiscent of the vessel seizures that Iran's Revolutionary Guards would carry out in the past. And here's what's interesting. The hijacked ship, the Galaxy Leader, passed by one of Iran's cargo vessels before the attack. This Iranian vessel is called Behzad. It's sanctioned by America. US suspects this cargo ship moonlights as a forward spying base. Behzad is in the Red Sea since the year 2021. It replaced an Iranian vessel called Saviz, which too was suspected of spying. Do you see what all of this is pointing at? Tensions are increasing at the Red Sea. The stretch of water is crucial for cargo. Most ships traveling from Europe to Asia take this route. It is the shortest and hence most cost-effective. But the hijacking of the Galaxy Leader points at a disturbing sign. It is a sign of how the war in West Asia could take a toll on the global supply links. In fact, Reuters is reporting that at least 2 commercial vessels linked to the same company have already changed their course in the Red Sea. And if a ship is to avoid the Red Sea of the Gulf of Aden altogether, then the alternative route is to sail around Africa via the Cape of Good Hope. This means the journey becomes longer and costlier. If such incidents of hijacking become the new normal in this war, then shipping companies may not be left with much option. Can India save its workers? In the heart of the Himalayas, a massive rescue operation is underway on a war footing. It is a race against time, a race to pull out 41 construction workers. They have been trapped in a tunnel for 11 days now. Their grieving families just have one request from the authorities. Take our home, our land, but please bring our son home. Indians are waiting with bated breath. The world is watching. The big question being asked is whether India will be able to save its trapped workers. This is the first video we have from inside the tunnel. Rescuers have been able to send in a camera, a medical endoscopy camera. It was pushed through a pipeline that drilled through the debris. You can see the construction workers. They are wearing helmets. They look exhausted, anxious, naturally so. The men can be seen peering at the camera sent by the rescuers. On Tuesday, India was able to send hot meals to these men. They received khichdi. It was a meal made of rice and lentils. It was sent through a 6-inch pipeline drilled through the rubble. Before the camera was sent, the rescuers communicated with the trapped men using radios. Rescuers have been trying to create new passageways to free them. One of the proposed routes is nearly half a kilometer long. Excavators are removing earth, concrete, rubble since the 12th of November, but rescue efforts have been slow, complicated by the falling debris. The heavy drilling machines have also repeatedly seen breakdowns, but that has not deterred the rescue operations. The Indian Air Force has twice airlifted a new kit to aid the operations. Meanwhile, trucks brought in sections of metal tubes wide enough for a man to enter so it can be wielded together as part of efforts to create a safe exit route. Rescue teams are also preparing 2 new approaches to reach the men. One of these approaches involves drilling a vertical shaft down from a forested hill above. And officials estimate that the proposed vertical shaft would need to be 291 feet deep. And this makes this a potentially complex dig right above an area that has already suffered one collapse. The second approach would be from the far side of the road tunnel, a much longer route estimated to be around 480 meters. The authorities are exploring many options and say that the focus is on saving lives. They have not set a time frame for the rescue operations, but assure that a delay, if any, will not harm the trapped workers. Food, water, other supplies are constantly being sent to them. But what about their emotional well-being? Well, the authorities have that sorted as well. There are doctors at the collapse site. Some of them are regularly communicating with the trapped workers, asking them to keep calm and practice yoga.
I have given the trapped workers the suggestion to take vitamin C, calcium and drink ORS and keep themselves hydrated. I've asked them to take rest and practice yoga and meditation.
The families of a few workers have been brought in as well. They have been accommodated in the hotels in a built-up area. In some cases, families have been able to talk to the men trapped inside. Besides the national and the state disaster management authorities, a robotics team of India's Defence Research Organisation is also at the spot. Foreign experts have been drafted in, including Australian independent disaster investigator Arnold Dix, who is also the president of the International Tunnelling and Underground Space Association. Speaking to Indian media outlets, Dix struck a confident tone on Tuesday. He said, and I'm quoting, "Those 41 men are coming home." The tragedy unfolded on the 12th of November. Men, some as young as 20, went inside the tunnel to do their daily jobs, and soon a part of the under-construction tunnel collapsed. And that was it. The fate of these workers was sealed. It has been 11 days now, and with each passing hour, the rescue effort becomes even more crucial. Has the Great Britain joined the so-called Third World? In a heated government hearing this Monday, UK lawmakers grilled their defence procurement minister, James Cartledge. Why, you ask? Well, the truth is so shocking it might be hard for you to believe it. It appears that the so-called Great Britain does not have a great track record when it comes to ensuring the dignified living conditions of its armed forces. British military personnel have reportedly been subjected to squalid conditions, living in appalling situations in what has been described as rat-infested barracks. And this raises a bigger question. Has the Great Britain descended into a standard it often gives other countries it looks down upon, the Third World? They say you should judge your government by how they treat the most vulnerable, also their armed forces. The armed forces protect the country from all kinds of threats. Then shouldn't they be taken care of by the country? As the lawmakers grilled the UK government on Monday, the British lawmaker Helen Morgan brought attention to one constituent's living condition. The military personnel were reportedly living in rat-infested accommodation, with 2 to 6 soldiers living in the same room. Can you imagine that? The condition was so bad, in fact, that makeshift measures were taken. They brought in 40 shipping containers and repurposed them into rudimentary hotel rooms just so that they can live in them. Seeking accountability, the lawmakers pressed Cartledge for reassurance on whether there were concrete plans to improve the living conditions. Another lawmaker claimed almost 5,000 military personnel's homes were plagued by black mold and damp walls a year ago. Many of these properties have families with kids living in them. A year on, they continue to live in these conditions. They say at least 60% of these housing units require immediate attention. The lawmakers have said that the situation was not good and demanded that the government fix the accommodation. In response to that grilling, Minister James Cartledge apologized and assured that he will look into these claims. He said that the government is working to ensure that the forces personnel benefit from the work that the government is doing. But you see, this is not the first time that such a report has come out. A BBC report from a few years ago described the soldiers' barracks as worse than being on the front line. Reports up until last year, in fact, indicated how dozens of military personnel as well as their families say they have been forced to live in these damp houses without heating. Some say they have waited for days or sometimes weeks for repairs. In fact, according to UK's official figures, about 3% of the flats and homes across the UK are classified as having damp. But here's a caveat. This official figure counts only those cases deemed severe enough to sway a surveyor's house health safety test. The reality is this, that far more homes are affected by damp and mold. And the sad part is, its impact is not evenly spread. And why is it a problem, you ask? Because damp affects mental as well as physical health. People who live in damp houses report more depression, more anxiety. It can impair immunity, hormonal functions, and the cardiovascular system. That's the effect that it has. Damp promotes dust mites, bacteria, molds, viruses, which can cause diseases. Those hit the hardest are children, older people, people with allergies, asthma, cystic fibrosis, and other lung diseases. Surely people deserve better than this. Living in such neglected conditions is sure to affect the welfare and the morale of the military personnel. Think about it. Surely a first world country should not have to face these challenges, especially soldiers who lay down their lives for their country. They should not be treated this way. And if this is happening year after year, then where does accountability lie? Why is it being ignored? Surely the personnel of the Royal British Forces deserve more than the British government's ignominy. Two days ago, India's aspirations to win the Cricket World Cup were shattered. Despite being in exceptional form, the outcome did not tilt in India's favour. While India stood by the men in blue, many pointed at what is called the Kettleborough curse. An umpire whose presence has always resulted in India's loss. It so happens Kettleborough was the umpire during the final match against Australia as well. Take a look.
Cricket in India has always been rife with unique superstitions. But this World Cup, it appeared that the men in blue had overcome all the jinxes. They won all matches in the lead up to the final. They even beat New Zealand for the first time in an ICC event in 20 years. They got past the Kiwis in the semi-finals, which they had failed to do so previously, despite finishing at the top of the points table the last two tournaments. But this time was different. All odds were in India's favour. The team was on a 10-match winning streak. So what happened on the day of the final? Many are pointing at the Kettleborough curse. Let's introduce you to Richard Kettleborough. He is an English umpire and he is especially notorious in India. Every time Kettleborough has umpired a match that India has played, the men in blue have lost. Take for example India's clash against Sri Lanka at the 2014 T20 World Cup, which also happened to be the final of the tournament, or India's semi-final defeat to Australia at the 2015 ODI World Cup, India's semi-final against the West Indies at the 2016 T20 World Cup, India's defeat to Pakistan in the 2017 Champions Trophy final, or India versus New Zealand in the 2019 ODI World Cup semi-final. Many also call this man India's most unlucky umpire. Reports as early as 17th November, 2 days before the final, it revealed that Kettleborough alongside Richard Illingworth would be the umpire for the grand finale of the World Cup. Soon after, chatter began about the Kettleborough curse. India ended up losing the match to Australia. It was a 6-wicket defeat. For many, the result was unexplainable. Tweets pinning the blame on the British umpire began going viral. This one, for example: "If there is anyone to blame, it's Richard Kettleborough. Nothing good ever happens to India when this guy stands as umpire in knockout matches." Now, as the men in blue and cricket fans move forward, fans hope that Kettleborough never umpires another India match again. But is that too tall an ask, or is it fair in the world of superstition? You decide.
Our next story is about someone who is so tired of being called old that by now probably he wishes no one remembers his birthday. But you see, you don't have that luxury when you are America's oldest president. And you don't have that luxury all the more if your age is constantly the topic of discussion. Joe Biden turned 81 on Monday. It is a milestone that, unfortunately for Biden, drew all the more attention to his age than he would like. At this point, I'm sure he would love it if people just forget the fact that he turned a year older. Biden even tried to resort to humor in order to persuade the voters that his age and experience actually is an asset to tackle America's problems. At a ceremony on Monday to pardon the national Thanksgiving turkey, Biden joked that he was not around for the first such turkey event 76 years ago. Also, that it was difficult turning 60. Now, jokes aside, the fact is that he is the oldest president in American history. In fact, if re-elected, Biden would be 86 by the end of his second term in office. Just for some perspective here, Republican Ronald Reagan, who had the prior record as the oldest U.S. president, put an end to his second four-year term at age 77 in 1989. You see, Americans have been worried. Opinion polls have shown that they are concerned about whether Biden is too old or is he even mentally unfit for office. A YouGov poll released just days before Biden's birthday found that 54% voters think he no longer has the competence to carry the job of the president. And that number, by the way, is up from 49% who said the same in February. In a mid-September Reuters Ipsos poll, voters expressed concern over Biden's age and his fitness for office. 77% of the respondents, including 65% of Democrats, said Biden is too old to be president, while just 39% said Biden was mentally sharp enough for the presidency. And by comparison, 56% of the poll respondents said Trump is too old for the office. 54% said he was mentally sharp enough to handle the challenges that come with the post. The thing is, Biden has not also won the perception battle. Far from it. Stumbling on the Air Force One staircase, shaking hands in the air, his fall at a U.S. Air Force Academy graduation. These incidents obviously do not evoke confidence among the American voters. You remember the time when Biden's staff had to cut him off mid-sentence at a news conference in Hanoi? The president was interrupted by his staff after he started rambling during a media address. And shortly after, the American president was seen leaving the podium. A recent survey by Bloomberg News and Morning Consult this month found that voters in 7 swing states are more likely to associate old age with Biden than any other topic. And in an open-ended question asking what they had heard about the candidates lately, hundreds of respondents cited Biden's age. And think about it. Why would the voters, especially the youth, want a leader who does not invoke confidence about being fit enough for the job? Biden has tried his best to convince them that he is not too old, but that does not seem to be working. Has Microsoft become the biggest winner in the chaos that is OpenAI today? Here's why I ask this. Look at how Microsoft stocks have performed in the last 2 days. It has risen 2.1% in the last 48 hours and is currently trading at an all-time high. It so happens that this record comes at the heel of a whirlpool weekend at the Silicon Valley. Just look at what happened at OpenAI, the makers of ChatGPT. The company's board of directors abruptly fired the CEO, Sam Altman. This was on the 17th of November. And why did this happen? Well, the board will not tell us the real story. Let's tell you a little bit about Sam Altman. He is one of the biggest faces in Silicon Valley today. Altman is all of 38. He is a Stanford dropout. The brain behind ChatGPT, a platform that has taken the world by storm. Safe to say, Sam Altman is a poster child of artificial intelligence. What he is also is one of Silicon Valley's most well-connected tech leaders, plus a prolific fundraiser. So why was he asked to leave the company? Microsoft is not complaining, of course. The tech giant has 49% share in OpenAI, and it was quick to rope in Altman to lead their new AI research team. Altman, by the way, was not alone. Walking into the Microsoft office with him was Greg Brockman, the former president of OpenAI. 500 more employees of ChatGPT may follow soon. They have written an open letter asking the board to step down. Either the board resigns or the 500 employees quit. And these employees claim they already have offers. So we are back to the question, is Microsoft the bigger winner in this chaos? Is OpenAI's loss Microsoft's gain? Microsoft already has OpenAI's IP or intellectual property rights. What it now also has is the brain and the team that was once OpenAI. And add to that Microsoft's resources and infrastructure. Does this sound like a winning recipe? Also consider this, by absorbing OpenAI's top talent, Microsoft keeps them from joining Microsoft's competitors like Google and Meta. A Roman emperor has now been branded transgender by a British museum. The museum decided to refer to the 3rd century AD ruler Elagabalus as she to be sensitive to their pronoun references in a display. So what do we know about this Roman emperor? Let's find out.
A Roman emperor has been branded transgender by a British museum. Elagabalus ruled Rome in the 3rd century AD. Historians believe the emperor was extraordinarily handsome. He had a short military haircut and bright eyes. Elagabalus dressed in precious silks and draped himself with gems. It is believed that this Roman emperor spent his days in the company of women in his palace, singing, dancing, weaving and wearing a hairnet, eye makeup and rouge. The North Herefordshire Museum is referring to Elagabalus as she. This decision was based on the account of Roman chronicler Cassius Dio. He claims Elagabalus was termed wife, mistress, and queen. He took a series of male lovers, even told one of them not to call him lord, instead to take him for a lady. The emperor consulted a physician for a sex change operation. This was thousands of years ago during the Roman Empire. But here's a twist in the tale. Cassius, who served as the chronicler, had actually become the ruler following the murder of Elagabalus. Many historians believe Cassius's accounts of Elagabalus are nothing but character assassination. Here's what a Cambridge Classics professor pointed out. The Romans didn't have our idea of trans as a category, but they used accusations of sexual behavior as a woman as one of the worst insults against men. Elagabalus had quite a reputation. Historians say that during one of the feasts, the emperor had several of his guests lashed to a water wheel. The wheel turned slowly and drowned the guests as other horrified diners looked on. Another time, Elagabalus released dozens of leopards and lions just as his guests had finished eating. He once also let loose poisonous snakes among the crowds at the gladiatorial games. Elagabalus was killed in March 222 AD, just 4 years into his reign, by one of his own soldiers.
How safe are your children, both online and offline? If you are a parent, I believe you've had the conversation with your children, one where you tell them to be careful around strangers, especially those who look doubtful. But what do you do when your acquaintance or an otherwise perfectly friendly neighbor turns out to be a child predator? Look at Australia. You might believe pedophilia is rare in first world nations, but figures tell otherwise. A research from the University of New South Wales has made some alarming revelations. The survey has found that about 1 million Australian men have shown tendencies of child sexual abuse. Let me repeat that. 1 million Australian men have shown tendencies of child sexual abuse. This includes not just sexual interactions with children under the age of 18, but also sexual feelings towards them. Even online sexual conversations with children and deliberately watching pornographic material involving children. Here are the figures. 9.4% of Australian men endorsed behaviors that are sexually offending for children. This makes up for every 1 in 10 Australian men. Let me repeat that for you. 1 in 10 Australian men endorse behaviors that are sexually offending for children. 4.3% of them have engaged in inappropriate conversations with children online. 2.5% have admitted to watching child pornography. 3.2% of Australian men have had sexual interactions with children below the age of 18. 1 in 6 saying they have had sexual feelings towards them. About 23.7% of Australians had experienced child sexual abuse. Nearly 8.7% were forced into sex. More than 1 in 3 Australian girls experienced child sexual abuse. That's what the revelations according to that study are. Alarming, isn't it? But you know what makes it even worse? There is a good chance that these figures might be underreported. Most of the men who sexually offended children fell in similar categories, by the way. They were heterosexual, did not work with children, were born in Australia, were working men, married or lived with their partner, had no children in their household and were white. You see, they are called invisible predators for a reason. A white employed and married predator is more likely to hide in plain sight. You would alarm your kid about a shady-looking person, but would you suspect a husband, a relative, a trusted friend? According to UNICEF, roughly 90% of adolescent girls who have been sexually abused have reported that their first perpetrator was someone they knew. And it's not just Australia. Of course, child sexual abuse is a global problem. At least 120 million teenage girls globally have been forced to engage in sex or perform other sexual acts, and that makes up for every 1 girl in 10. In the US, according to the CDC, About 1 in 4 girls and 1 in 13 boys experience child sexual abuse. According to the Internet Watch Foundations, 3 in every 5 child sexual abuse reports are hosted in an EU member state. Last year, over 150,000 reports of confirmed child sexual abuse were reported in the EU. The Netherlands accounted for over 82,000 of these cases. Slovakia followed with more than 30,000 incidents. The EU also hosts the most child sexual abuse material in the world. According to an index released by the World Childhood Foundation in 2019, Pakistan is the least safe place for children in terms of sexual abuse. Egypt ranks second, followed by Mozambique. According to a Pakistani NGO, a child was sexually abused every 2 hours in Pakistan this year. Between January and June alone, there were over 2,200 cases of child sexual abuse in the country. So you see, whether it's Australia, the West, or Asia, child sexual abuse is a deep-rooted issue which often, unfortunately, goes unnoticed. Let's now tell you what else made news around the world. Time for Gravitas Global Headlines.
North Korea fires a military spy satellite, confirms Seoul's military. The launch comes hours after Japan confirmed that Pyongyang had warned it of an imminent launch. North Korea is eager to operate spy satellites to deal with what it calls escalating US-led military threats. But its 2 previous attempts to place a spy satellite into orbit earlier this year ended in failure due to technical issues. Azerbaijan president accuses France of inciting conflicts in the Caucasus by arming Armenia. In a statement read out by his foreign policy advisor, the president said Paris was disrupting stability not only in its former and current colonies, but also in the South Caucasus, where it is supporting separatist trends and separatists. Baku and Yerevan have been locked in a decades-long territorial conflict over Azerbaijan's Nagorno-Karabakh region, which Baku reclaimed in September after a lightning offensive against Armenian separatists. German government freezes future spending pledges for the rest of 2023 after a court ruling blew a massive hole in its finances. The Constitutional Court decided last week that Chancellor Olaf Scholz's coalition had broken debt rules when it transferred 60 billion euros in loan authorizations earmarked for pandemic support to a climate fund. The move appended the government's spending plans, and the Finance Ministry of Europe's biggest economy immediately suspended most projects under the fund from 2024. Food delivery riders for the firm Deliveroo are not entitled to trade union rights such as collective bargaining, the UK Supreme Court ruled on Tuesday. The Independent Workers' Union of Great Britain had earlier tried to represent Deliveroo riders in North London in order to negotiate on issues of pay, hours and holiday with the company. But in a unanimous ruling, 5 judges at the UK's highest court dismissed the appeal. They said they agreed with lower court judgments that the staff are not in an employment relationship with Deliveroo and are therefore not entitled to collective bargaining rights. The city of Stockholm supported Sweden's bid to host the 2030 Winter Olympics. Under the bid proposal, events would be held in Stockholm as well as several other smaller Swedish towns, including Falun, Åre and Östersund. Sweden's Olympic Committee hailed the support. Stockholm hosted the Summer Games in 1912, but has never hosted a Winter Olympics despite numerous attempts over the years. Spanish police detains 3 people as part of an anti-terror investigation into the shooting of former head of Spain's Conservative People's Party in Catalonia. One of the suspects was arrested in the southern port city of Malaga and the other 2 in Granada, confirmed the officials. 2 of them were Spanish men and the third arrested was a British woman. Police are looking into whether they have links with foreign countries. Flash flooding in Somalia kills 50 people and drives nearly 700,000 from their homes, a government official said. The Horn of Africa region is experiencing torrential rainfall and floods linked to the El Niño weather phenomenon, claiming dozens of lives and causing large-scale displacement, including in Somalia, where the downpours have destroyed bridges and inundated residential areas. Atlantic fishing nations agree to protect sharks and rays by limiting the retention of several bycatch species, but advocacy groups warn progress is still lagging. At the conclusion of the International Commission for the Conservation of Atlantic Tunas this week, countries agreed on new measures for the protection of cetaceans, whale sharks and mobulid rays, and the conservation of Atlantic blue sharks. Sharks and rays are facing what conservationists have called an extinction crisis, with nearly two-thirds of coral reef species at risk, according to a study this year that assessed data from the International Union for Conservation of Nature.
On that note, it's a wrap on this edition of Gravitas Tonight. This is me, Molly Gambhir, signing off. We're leaving you with Gravitas Images. Thanks very much for watching.
India's Global Voice, the channel that brings you the biggest stories.
Israel woke up to a barrage of thousands of rockets fired from the Gaza Strip.
אזרחי ישראל, אנחנו במלחמה.
Hostilities have broken out between Israel